Welcome to what is mostly preaching to the choir. I'll address the thumbnail first, but in a way it's kind of straightforward. Uh, Back when GT7 came out, it was averaging around about a 5.5 out of 10 rating, and then not even a month after it came out, the game was down for about 30 hours, and the reason ended up being that they had to change some stuff online to make the grinding even worse. Essentially, it made it to where we had to run the same event over and over in order to make the most amount of money, and that amount of money was worse than any other Gran Turismo in the history of the franchise. AKA to promote buying the in game credits so people can buy the FOMO, fear of missing out, 20 million credit cards and the Legends dealerships and stuff like that. So, to me, a valid reason. So then after that, maybe before there was around 1,000 or so, I wasn't keeping tons of track of it before the 30-hour downtime. There was around about 1,000 or so reviews on Metacritic. After that, probably within about 2 days or so, 30-hour period ish, it maybe went to about 5,000, and the Metacritic rating dropped to about a 1.6 out of 10. So, after that, while it's probably not the absolute only reason, it's definitely the main reason, seeing the Metacritic score go down, thus some people on social media reacted to it, and kind of a snowball effect from there, but starting from the Metacritic score going down. Polyphony Digital and Kazunori Oyuchi himself, the main guy, released a statement basically saying, "We apologize for this and we'll strive to make sure that the game has the best experience for the fans," and was specifically mentioned that players will not need to play the same few events over and over to get credits. It's probably not worded exactly in that way, but you can still go back and look at that statement. So after that statement was made, around about, and that's when I started keeping track too. I actually kind of looked on it for a while, probably 12-hour basis or so, and even after that, probably once every few weeks, to see the Metacritic score changing. Within a few days after that, it went to maybe around 8,000 Metacritic scores, and the average jumped to about a 2.2 out of 10. Nice solid gain there of 0.6, with getting almost double the amount of people after the good comment by Polyphony Digital. So it kind of means that no, the majority of these ratings weren't really about the money thing, because even almost the majority ratings were around about 3,000 of the 8,000 total at that point, almost half. We were still rating it incredibly low, because it only raised the score about 0.6 out of 10. But then, lo and behold, to this day, and I'm sure throughout the entire history of GT7, I really don't see this changing whatsoever, so I'm going to go ahead and say with confidence that the game will die like this. You still have to do the same, run about 3 events over and over to get credits after doing the weekly time trials that are only a one-time payout. So to get anything that's more than just a one-time payout, you do the same 3 events over and over and over and over and over and over, because those events have been added since 2022, and it's been the same events since then. So Polyphony Digital and Kaz himself outright lied about that. So lo and behold, look at the thumbnail. We're around about 12,000 now Metacritic score, and the game is a 2.6 out of 10. So people made the argument, oh, it was review bombed because of the at the time making it to where people had to run the same events over and over. But Kaz said he was going to fix that, so the review bomb is irrelevant. It's not an accurate scored game. Well, to be fair, the review score has gone up since then, but it's gone up from 1.6 out of 10 to a 2.6 out of 10. And the review bomb only maybe counted for of like what people were considering the review bomb time period of it. Of course, there's probably individual review bombing throughout the entire time of the span of the game being out, but in terms of what the people talk about, the time of the review bombings happening around about that 30-hour downtime and a day or two after that, counted for maybe like 4,000, I'd say. Probably went from about 1,000-ish to 5,000-ish in the review bombing period that people were talking about. And that's 4,000 out of the 12,000, that's about a third. So with 2/3 more of the ratings happening, the game went up a whopping 1 out of 10 points. Gran Turismo 7 sucks. I very much agree with the rate. I've said before, and you can go back and look, I'm not just making this up to make a point or whatever, I've stayed by this for a while. In terms of modern racing games, which I've made myself known on that, and so is pretty much all social media, whatever the site may be, no matter how big or small, the state of modern racing games sucks, arguably even worse than Gran Turismo 7, but I'll get to the arguably in a minute. Considering the modern state of racing games, I would give Gran Turismo 7, and I have for a while at this point, about a 5 out of 10 relative to a modern racing game. So, does that suck compared to modern racing games? It's about average. I mean, we're getting a lot more kind of the simulation stuff coming up, and frankly, they all look better than GT7. But I mean, of course, there's been some racing games, while not direct apples to apples comparisons, that have obviously been worse that came out fairly recently, like Test Drive, Unlimited, Solar Crown, and quite a few other like lower end ones as well that didn't have as much benefit. What you really want to call a modern racing game kind of depends on the person. I'm not going to give an exact ratio there really, but I mean, yeah, there's definitely been some that are worse, and I mean, even of kind of about as close direct to apples as we get. I'm not really gonna say like Forza Motorsport 8 is what it really is particularly much better. There's some things about it that are way better, but there's some things that are worse as well. Both are extremely underwhelming and outright lying. Kaz made a specific statement when the game was getting review bombed to say that, oh, players will no longer need to play the same events over and over to get money. And yet, to this day, you quite literally have to. He lied. The Forza devs, maybe there was an outright person involved with it, but just the Forza team in general, at the very least, made the statement even before the game came out, probably when the most eyeballs were on it, to say that Forza Motorsport was built from the ground up. They lied. There's way, way more evidence of stuff being a direct copy and paste than their stuff being completely. Most of the things are kind of in the middle. There's new individual pieces and parts or pixels or whatever you want to call it added to them, but the same underlying foundation was from previous games. So a lot of it's kind of in the middle, but calling it truly, really from the ground up is a lie. So, yeah, the apples to apples comparison to Forza is both they're extremely underwhelming and I'd argue failures, especially compared to the franchise as a whole. Forza, it's hard to not argue it's a failure. I mean, look at what's going on with the studio. But in terms of relative to the franchise, I'd call Gran Turismo 7 a failure too, even if sales might say otherwise. We'll kind of get to the sales in a minute. And then other not so quite to compare games, while some of them are worse too, a whole heck of a heap are better too, and especially coming up. I see no reason to think stuff like Set of Course of Evo or Project Motor Racing or again a whole heck of a heap will be better. Another game I was trying to think of, it didn't off the top of my head because it was entirely irrelevant, was Rensport. That was a game I was trying to think of that's a bit more of a comparison, but I couldn't, so that's why I moved on to Test Drive Solar Crown. From what it looks like, it's yeah, GT7 is probably a bit better than Ren Sport too, but that ain't exactly saying much either, because when's the last time you had much interest in that? So, yeah, good for PD. They're beating rehash of a franchise that killed it. Another rehash of a franchise that's looking like it's going to kill it in Forza. And a new game that's just tried to do what others were doing, but the other old ones did way better. So, yeah. Good on PD. They beat them. That ain't much of a crowd there now, is it? And in general, I always feel like saying it's a 5 out of 10 for a modern racing game is being a bit too nice, because I'd say there are probably more games that are better than it came out in the last few years. Again, it's not really worth an exact date on what you call a modern racing game. Then there are games that are worse than it, but generally speaking, you would think that studios would try to make their game on average better than a 5 out of 10. In terms of the advancement of video games as a whole, you would think more things that come out are better than the average for a video game in general than the lower. Especially, you would think, too, of like racing games compared to the rest. Too, because there's stigma of racing games recently of the quality going down, and I very much agree with that. So, relative to the amount of racing games better to worse, I'm probably being too nice to Gran Turismo, but I will say this straightforward. I do believe that it's 2.6 out of 10 relative to what Gran Turismo is to the GT7 is to the Gran Turismo franchise pretty much nails it. I would say relative to the franchise as a whole, GT7 is about a 2.6 out of 10. One out of 4, however you want to look at that. The graphics on par with the rest of the franchise. The graphics are amazing. Granted, they're not a whole heck of a heap better than GT Sport, but I mean, they're still amazing. I'll take it. I'd say it's probably about the equivalent of like Gran Turismo 6 to Gran Turismo 5, slight improvement. Some of the cars got slight upgrades, tracks a tiny bit, stuff like that. As it was to like GT7 compared to GT Sport. A little bit of tracks look a bit better, a little bit of cars look a bit better, but it's not a whole heck of a heap of improvement, really. But either way, relative to the system they're on, still amazing. That's the best part of it, is the graphic. Physics are pretty relative. I don't have a wheel. I've said from when I started the channel, pretty much, I'm not really the one to be the most in-depth about physics. Take the most salt that you take of anything that I say. Way more than a grain on physics, but I'll say the physics are fun enough. I have more fun driving the front-wheel drive cars in GT7 than I did in Sport, but I'm not the one to judge for realistic. And the physics system changed like at least 4 times, probably more by this point in the course of GT7. So in terms of the overall like Metacritic score and stuff, and the physics have changed 4 different times, at least 4 that I can remember. That's not relative to the average, is it? When it's already changed 4 times and might very well change more. And that's the second best part. I guess I give the physics like an 8 out of 10, but that's also the one I'm very much most relevant. Graphics pretty much a 10 out of 10. Physics about an 8 out of 10. Sound like 7 out of 10. Nothing special, but nothing terribly. Complain about it, way better than the vacuum cleaners back in the day. But in terms of stuff that's quite important to the game, like new content, well, I mean, everybody's been complaining about the SUV types. In terms of new content throughout the course of the game, I'd say it's about a 5 out of 10. But in terms of what it's been recently, like a 2 out of 10. I mean, the Nissan Z-Tune was cool. The Unimog was interesting, although yet again in the most recent physics change, they made it to where the cars barely roll anymore. It's only the absolute insanity ones that the ones that are absolute insanity. I kind of messed up saying that. The absolute insane ones that roll. Even a Unimog doesn't. You pretty much needs to be a Fiat 500 for engine swap and insane stuff like that to get them to roll anymore. So that just means quite a lot less videos of me, because it was one of the things I try and do every update is find at least one car that rolls. Now on average we might get one car a year that rolls, and before we get at least one car in update, so that sucks for me. But the point being is that like Nissan Z-Tune was cool, the Unimog was unique. But, I mean, with most of the updates are either SUVs or stuff that are pretty similar to other vehicles in the game and stuff like that. It kind of sucks, especially when the bulk of the people are asking for new Group 4 and Group 3 cars, because that's the races that get shoved down our throat over and over and over and over and over and over to the point to where why the cotton picking. Yeah, I wanted to say something else there. Why in the blue blazes do PD focus so much on the Group 3 and 4 over and over and over every cotton picking time to no end, when there's every other simulation racing game? I legitimately can't think of any that don't, unless it's literally a bike game or a truck game or something like that. Any game that has a car in it seems to have the equivalent of Group 3 and 4 in it. Why does PD shove this down our throats every time? This is somewhat of a complaint of some content creators, but I mean, as I've always said, to some extent, the point is to kind of hate the content creators, because like we've said, Gran Turismo's turned into the fake wrestling of simulation racing esports, because there are some heels and some faces of content creation. I can't really blame them on it if that's how they make their videos as popular as they can and can make the money off a failing franchise. Can't really blame them for that. When the franchise itself is failing, of course, they're going to have to change up their content. I've made a whole long video about that before, and I still stand by that, so I don't really fault the people who are faces or heels or do it kind of where they're switched their stance on some things, whatever it may be. But it's to the point now where we get some content creators are saying, oh, like Gran Turismo is the best it's ever been, and it's improving every time, and blah, 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 blah. Just talking about the same Group 3 race at the same track that's been done 100 times throughout the game. Maybe there's slightly different pit strategy. Maybe the balance of performance is a slightly different meta car. When at no point has there ever been more than like 3 cars that can even remotely compete. Yeah. Again, don't hate the players as much as you hate the game. Again, the players that are meant to be the heels, the ones that are meant to be hated, go for it. If that's what they want, then so be it. I'm not going to fault them on that. But when it seems like a lot of the content that's getting a lot of the views or so, like downright to the point of it's near toxic positivity, that ain't the best look either. We're to the point now where we haven't had any of the nations or manufactured exhibition series in a while and a half, right, Gunner? We're not really getting any like extra miscellaneous stuff like extra time trials or extra little events or stuff like that, like $1 million challenges like you get in the past that kind of have their own menu up on the top right of the home screen, stuff like that. In a while and a half. Anytime that we get new vehicles, well, half of them are SUVs that no one cares about anyway, and then they're just shoved in a time trial or weekly challenge, and then it's over in 2 weeks for a time trial that realistically most people don't put more than 30 minutes in, or a week for a weekly challenge that most people do once and never again because it doesn't pay remotely enough. So then that's the end of using these new cars because they're almost never interested enough to use anyway. Well, I can't really fault them completely. It would definitely help if more content creators were realistic about the game. They don't have to bash it completely. I get that a lot of these content creators have made their careers around like the racing wheels they use and going to the Gran Turismo events and stuff like that. So they're probably contractually obligated to be fairly positive about it. Because the racing wheels, some of them are directly tied with Gran Turismo, and the ones that go to the events are obviously directly tied to Gran Turismo. But it's hurting the franchise as a whole when all they do is put out positive after positive after positive of the same Group 3 and 4 races over and over and over since GT Sport Closed Beta. Back in GT Sport Closed Beta, I was more positive than I've been on the franchise in a while, because it's weird and wonderful things that they were trying with some new bounce of performance of street cars and stuff like that. And while I did the PD Logic at the time, because that was kind of like how the internet went that time, and I did a parody of that, like I did parody of Dirty Nerds Racing League being parody of actual races and stuff like that. It was more of a parody meant for fun and stuff back then. But the point being is, oh, look at this testing for Group 3 and Group 4. That was new to the game at that point. They had GT300 and GT500 back in early Gran Turismos, but they didn't really use those. So they compete. So I understood why probably 75% of races in GT Sport closed beta were Group 3 and Group 4, because they had to figure out the balance of performance for those new things. But guess what, folks? It ended up that at least 75%, probably now it's more like 90% of the races over and over and over for 8 years now have been the same thing. Over and over and over. And then for people that like the offline stuff, granted, I'm not as much for that. Sophie's improving, cool. If I ever get a PS5, which now it's getting more expensive, it's tariffs, that's kind of a different video. So even less likely there with that. I'd probably enjoy the Sophie, that's fair enough. But especially for those on PS4, whatever new stuff that we're getting, they barely use any races for. And again, they might be for a week, and then that race never returns again. Fear of missing out with the weekly events. Fear of missing out with the Legends dealerships, where you have to play the same events offline over and over and over, so you have the money to get the cars in the Legends dealership. Or fear of missing out, which is just so people buy the in-game credits. Like, some things in GT7 are great. So I'm not going to act like overall the game is, like, abysmal. Like I've said time and again, why there's far too many parallels to ignore, and it's to the point where it's getting downright scary, parallels to, like, the most evil franchises out there, like NBA 2K and stuff like that. It's never been to that point, and I don't realistically ever think it will be to that point. But there's so many parallels to the point where something like NBA 2K is like maybe a 0.5 out of 10, with maybe about the only relative positive being is the graphics ain't awful, but they also ain't improving. Some people say like NBA 2K14 is looking better than NBA 2K26 looks, and stuff like that. So it's in the literal sense, it's unfair to give it outright 0 out of 10, but in the metaphorical sense of what it's doing to the fan base and getting people addicted to gambling and stuff, it's beyond. It's the worst video game franchise ever. There's far too many parallels there, and again, I don't think it will ever get that bad. In a lot of ways, it'd be hard too, because it's not a yearly thing. It's not associated with one particular league in general, so you can't really do the monetization aspect of it with like the gambling for cards or whatever way they could see it going, like for a NASCAR game or whatever, when it's associated with a particular league. But yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of repeating stuff that I've said before, and that, like I've said before, in and of itself, kind of gets old. But to end off the video, it's kind of the point I was making. Most people get it. Most of the reviews were not from the initial review bomb on Metacritic. Most of the people, all in all, that talk about Gran Turismo are negative towards it. Especially back round about the first year or so it was out. A lot of the people come 2023 or so, when the events just started being the same over and over and over with no substance whatsoever, when it seemed obvious that the offline events were just repeating the same stuff over and over with no stop whatsoever, when really by like 2023 or so, the only thing interesting truly added were maybe one car a month at max, and maybe 2 engine swaps that month at max, and even that, something like Forza wipes the floor with Gran Turismo in terms of engine swaps and stuff. So yeah, a lot of those people left. So why it's less of the negativity now, that's just because there's less of everyone now. It's 2025 and the game came out in 2022. So, of course, it's by natural progression, there's going to be less people. But relative to the beginning, I'd say there's far less negative, and it's still majority negative. I will say this, in terms of YouTube itself, it does seem like the most views are towards the positive content, but I have a theory about that too. Because YouTube is the most tied in like terms of the racing wheels and like direct ties of Gran Turismo via like Gran Turismo TV and stuff like that. The products to then sell to people, and to some extent you can even tie that to like gloves or it's recording software, even if you want to go that route, because there's even like specific recording in TV and all that that would use it, like the physical Gran Turismo events and stuff like that. When all that is tied together, and a lot of the people being positive towards Gran Turismo use a lot of that same stuff, YouTube is the aggregate of it, because YouTube itself, the companies can pay for videos to be boosted. To some extent, YouTube is pay to win, whether the individual creator realizes or not. Gran Turismo or Sony or whoever can then pay for a video to be boosted. And I'm going to say that some of these creators realize this too. But I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say sometimes it happens that they don't too. I'm not going to say individuals that do or don't realize it, but yeah, I guarantee you some of them are in on it. And then the video just magically does better because Polyphony Digital, Sony, Wheel Company, Racing Gear Company, Monitor Company, any and PlayStation itself paid for the video to do better. And really about the only site where that works straightforward is YouTube. Most people commenting in Reddit or whatever bots been proven that Reddit has a whole heck of heap of bots in general that do determine what ends up being liked and stuff. Generally speaking, that's kind of more on a political and social level. It's not really as much yet on like a business type level. I'm not saying it doesn't happen whatsoever. But while Reddit is way too much bots, it's not quite to the YouTube standards. And then things like X is kind of a cesspool anyway, so I mean, X is I don't go there, and I'd rather not. A lot of the drama ends up coming from X, whether it's people, teams, whatever, cheating. X has a lot of drama and stuff. So just in terms of the platform of X nowadays in general, it's exited what the old ways of Twitter were, and it's successful. So there's not as much positive there, just given the platform as a whole. So YouTube is kind of the aggregate of it, and to where what all in all the majority of what I post to be initially on YouTube nowadays kind of adjacent video type platforms to it as well. Of course, to me and like what I'm viewing and stuff is going to show more of the positive stuff, whether it's the algorithms or whether it's in terms of the viewership on what the people that might watch me to watch others do, whether it's your active choice or algorithm that's based on buying it up, whatever it may be, it's still going to associate with that. So the point that I'm being is, again, I don't really blame the individual trying to be more positive stuff, even though sometimes it ends up being borderline toxic and wrong and clickbait and all that kind of stuff in individual circumstances. On average, it's just YouTube allows it to kind of be pay to win. It's as much fault of YouTube as a site in general for the positivity getting way more views than the negative in any. It's YouTube in cahoots with the, probably to some extent, PlayStation, Sony, Gran Turismo, but especially like the wheel companies and the merchandise companies and the gear and all that kind of stuff too. So all that correlates together. And of course, I don't know this for absolutely certain. I mean, like I said, it is a theory, but to me, it makes logical sense when it seems like the site that fairly by far has the most positivity is YouTube, and the YouTube that's fairly by far is the one that's the most pay to win. Yeah, I mean, there's the direct correlation in more simple terms to sum it up, or whatever. I'd still argue the majority of the internet is definitely negative to Gran Turismo. I think the majority of the internet would agree more with the 2.6 out of 10 than would agree if Gran Turismo 7 just gets better and better. Gran Turismo 7 is in peak form. Gran Turismo 7 is improving now more than ever, blah blah blah, those type of videos. And a lot of the times too, to be fair, of the creators that make these type of videos have the occasional video too that's quite negative. And again, it's a heel turn to a face turn, that sort of stuff too. There usually ain't a creator out there that stays completely absolute toxic positivity the entire time. So give some credit to the creators as well. So at least they're trying to say their true own opinions while still keeping the contracts and stuff with the companies. But ultimately, yeah, I do wish the creators would do a better job about that. Ignore all these companies trying to force you to say stuff. In reality, of being honest about the games, the resources to play them, whatever it may be, would help the companies in the long term because it would give honest feedback to people who've used those things, whether it's playing the game or the resources themselves. A whole heck of a heap. It could probably give better, more honest feedback than those that are the initial testers and stuff for it. So, I mean, in a way, it kind of sucks all around. But the main thing really that sucks is the GT7. In the grand scheme of things, just remember more than anything. Don't hate the players as much as you hate the game. Again, some of them are outright heels, but a lot of the heels are the ones that purposely be negative to the point of causing problems and stuff are not really even as much on the video type platforms. They exist to some extent. But even like Kimi Valentini and stuff like that were on the platform is apparently retired. So even when like the toxic positivity was even retiring from YouTube and stuff like that, that just shows how down because of the toxic positivity has retired from YouTube, that just shows how down the platform has gone in terms of freedom of speech and equality and showing your opinions and stuff. But yeah, the point being is while what I consume might end up artificially being more turned to the positive, and on paper it might look like that the majority of people are saying Gran Turismo is the second coming of whatever you want to put there. Probably half of it I'm not even allowed to say on YouTube. Yeah, it's definitely not. In probably a lot of ways, I'm more positive towards the game than I should be. But to me, it's not a corporate type thing. To me, it's not trying to get into the algorithm type thing. It's just that I played the game for going on 25 years at this point, and it's genuinely, really, and truly what I'm best at in life. So of course I'm trying to be positive to what I can be and what I'm best at. But even for me, it's quite hard nowadays, and I understand the general sentiment that a lot of people have, is to play video games and especially watch content on video games to escape the realities and all that. But all in all, it's getting more and more of a reality that the video games intertwine with reality, especially those who are trying to make a living from it, and a lot of those trying to make a living from it kind of have to have the positivity in order to make that living. If they weren't artificially positive, they would lose a lot of the sponsorships and contracts and artificial boosting and all that. All in all, I'd even say the majority at this point of people that realize how bad Gran Turismo has gotten probably don't even post at all. Whether it's YouTube or Reddit or GT Planet or whatever it may be, probably don't even post at all. It's probably to the point where the silent majority are the ones that hate modern Gran Turismo. But even of those that are left, I'd say it's still the majority that don't like it. And rightfully so. For those that enjoy the game, I'm not saying they can't enjoy it. There are individual things I enjoy about the game. Just screwing around in the race creator thing, like putting a Fiona against a Tomahawk or whatever it may be. I mean, that's fun to occasionally do, but come up with the occasional new thing with that. The graphics are still great, stuff like that, but I mean, yeah, everything I wish could improve, like on all aspects, even like the best of things. There's always gradual improvement, and even just improvement of how the people react to it as well. I wish people weren't shackled to what the companies want them to say and all that. I wish people could truly say what they want, but we're to the point now where everything's kind of in decline. We're in decline of the economy, so people kind of have to force themselves to intertwine with the declining of companies, because the companies have to deal with the economy getting worse, so then they have to pump themselves up to make them look artificially better, so then they use the people that are then tied to them to do so, and then obviously that creates a worse product, and both people and the companies are artificially pushing this product. To get it better, the product itself doesn't feel the need to try as hard, so then the product itself gets worse, and then when the product itself gets worse, it creates more negativity, and then when people in general are more negative, they're less likely to buy it, and then that hurts the economy, and snowball effect. All in all, I do think overall the ones to blame are more Polyphony Digital and Sony and stuff like that. All in all, I don't hate the player as much as I hate the game. I get that some of this is economic. I get some of this is ties to other companies and all that. I very much understand that. But all in all, Polyphony Digital are the ones that have the most power to improve the little day-by-day stuff, like getting rid of the ball riding in the recent weekly race A. From what I can tell, people can still do that in the race. They reset the practice leaderboards, but from what I can tell, people are still doing it. They can fix miscellaneous things like some of the cars tuned to extreme settings not rolling over. When something like a Toyota Hilux stock could roll over, one of the iterations of it from the 2010s, there's that Moose test video of one of the 2010s Hilux could roll over. Certainly a car tuned in max settings rated off should roll over. That's realistic. Let's keep it that. That's like a Polyphony Digital. Sony could easily change the monetization type stuff. The game has been out for I'm not going to try and figure out the exact. I'll say roughly 3.5 years. And at this point, there's no need to have it be arguably even more monetization heavy than when it released. But there can be a joint effort at everybody in general to just be realistic about the game. However they can get away with it, even if they kind of have to deal with the companies, whatever it may be. I mean, the companies could even be realistic towards the game. The companies could even, unless your product improves at this point, unless it makes the racing more realistic, unless they make the racing more varied or whatever, we're going to pull out from associating with you. The companies could do their job to fight with it. Anyone and everyone could probably do a bit more to improve in general. But, I mean, all in all, no matter what opinions end up hearing and all that, I would still say, all in all, the majority of opinions, whether how quiet or loud they are, the majority in total are definitely negative, although I don't directly blame those that are being overly positive towards it. It sucks. I agree that GT7, relative to the Gran Turismo franchise as a whole, is about a 2.6 out of 10. But GT7 just outright sucks. Other than graphics, physics, sound, so many of the extremely important things like the amount of content that we're getting, what they do with the content, the sport mode, all that kind of stuff, absolutely horrible, deplorable, unexcusable. So, it sucks I have to make this video. It sucks that some people are shackled to not being able to share their opinions on it, but right now, what sucks more than all of it is Gran Turismo 7 itself. And that most certainly ain't worth E-haul in the slightest, folks.